Hello and welcome to Full Disclosure, a podcast project conceived entirely to let me spend more time with interesting people than I would ever get on the radio. This doesn't happen very often, Natalie Haynes, but you're one of my favourite radio presenters.
Shut up, is that
You
true?
are. Yeah, absolutely. I love your show.
Thanks.
Stand Up for the Classics. It's quite hard for people who are not familiar with it. It's quite hard to categorise. It's certainly...
Yeah, it is a bit. Yeah, I'll give you that.
It's not a genre,
No.
is it really?
No, the stand-up... I was a stand-up comedian for 10, 12 years after I left uni, and I had been a classicist at uni, and so gradually the two kind of merged. And when I started writing books, with Ancient Guide that came out in 2010, or as I like to think of it, 5 years ago,
Yes.
then I knew I needed a way to promote it because you couldn't get sales any other way. And I was like, imagine if I came to these book festivals where there's three people talking on a panel, and instead of that, you ditched the chairs and you didn't need to pay two or three other people. You could just pay me, and I'll just talk, and you can pay me 3 times the money.
And buy my books.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And so it took people a little bit of time, I think, to realise that wasn't a fully deranged idea. And it took me another 3 or 4 years to persuade the BBC that they wanted to let me do that on Radio 4. We started in 2014. But yeah, we'll be back for Series 12 next year.
So people listening still not entirely clear what it is.
I guess it is.
You work your way through. So it began with a book, and you'd have a sort of stage version.
Yeah, exactly. So I started out with sort of topics. In Ancient Guide, I did things like law in the ancient world, or politics in the ancient world, or the role of women, or the role that's played by the city versus a rural existence, which is a huge divide in ancient times in a way that it's perhaps not quite so much now. And then when we came to do the series for Radio 4, I made it biographical, and I said I'll stand up for a different person from antiquity each week. And so sometimes they're writers, sometimes they're politicians, sometimes they are people about whom we know almost... We did a programme on Sappho about whom we have 3 poems and otherwise just fragments. And I could get through all the things we actually know about Sappho in about 40 seconds. And it's like, well, I'm going to have to find a way to make this programme 28 minutes long. And so sometimes it's a tremendous exercise in talking about historiography and how history works and how ancient history works and what counts as a source and why we might have lost things and how that we've lost between 97 and 99% of ancient Greek literature. So... why
sometimes
might
it's the other way around, in that you're just going to struggle to distill it down into
sometimes
28
it's
minutes.
Cicero.
The subject is so huge. Yeah. 28 minutes. Go on then. Give me your best. Give me your best Cicero facts. So you don't think of yourself as a stand-up comedian anymore. I saw on your...
It's too tough. It's too tough a life. You can't claim it if you don't do it every day.
Yeah, so that's a personal perspective. You could do, couldn't you? Because you do that. You tour the book, you do a show, you stand up, and you make people laugh.
I know, but now
that's maths. That is.
I hear what you're saying, and so I'm offering you the classicist answer, which is that it feels disrespectful to my former colleagues who are doing a much harder job than I have to do. Because brutally, and I say this just before the tour starts, so feel free to watch me fall flat on my face in the ensuing days. When people turn up to my shows, what they're hoping for is like a fun, interesting talk. And I don't have to get a gag in every 60 seconds. Okay. Otherwise, they might, start throwing things. Yeah. That's not going to happen. My friends who are out on the circuit on a Friday night late show who are having to hit with gag to make sure they keep a fairly drunk audience in check, that is a rough job. So it just feels like I'm claiming something that I no longer do. But yes, there is no fourth wall. I do stand there. There is a microphone. People laugh. Yeah, I can't deny that bit. Yeah.
I asked that. I wanted to clarify that because I looked at the alumni page on your Cambridge College website, and it described you as a former comedian. I thought perhaps with a sense of relief from the college authorities.
Yeah, my Radio 4 producer, Mary, used to call me a recovering comedian, and I think that's probably right. It's like if things all went wrong, I guess I could slide back into it like a bad habit lost.
Already established that the radio show doesn't really have any genre, nor does the straddling of stand-up and classics, does it?
I don't think so.
You didn't follow in anybody else's footsteps.
No, it seemed really obvious to me that it would be a fun and interesting thing to do, but I can't pretend there was someone else doing it. I mean, brutally, there weren't very many women doing stand-up when I was doing stand-up. We were about 10%. It's better now, I think, in statistical
Were you the
terms.
first woman to get the Best Newcomer nod at the Perrier?
No, I was the first woman doing a solo show to be nominated for the Best Newcomer.
Yes.
So I think I'm right to say that Alice Lowe, I think, had been nominated as part of Garth Marenghi, or had.
Okay.
My memory for. I used to be really good at knowing who'd done what for the Perrier, and for the Booker, I used to have them all memorised, and now I'm like,
Life's
so
too short.
yeah, I think I was the first woman with a stand-up show.
Which is, an indication of how what it was like back then. I mean, how hard it was.
It was. I mean, it was incredibly hard. And the joy/horror of Edinburgh is that you're a much better performer at the end of it than you were at the start, because you've gone on stage and made an audience work that crowd for an hour a night, 26, 27 times. But you've also, best case scenario, lost hundreds, worst case scenario, thousands of pounds. Even if the show sells out every night, you're out to
People
the
don't realise that, do they?
It's whenever people complain about how expensive it is going to Edinburgh as a punter, I would like them to stop and take a minute. Because I did 5 shows in 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I was incredibly lucky. And I had a sponsor for those shows. And without that sponsor, I would have lost £10,000 a year, and I couldn't have afforded to do it.
Just extraordinary, isn't it?
It's like, and they sold out every night.
So you can't. You've
every
kept your
year.
end of the bargain.
Yeah, because the venues are tiny and the tickets are as expensive as people can make them. People go, "Oh, they're so expensive now."
Yeah.
It's like, you pay rent here for a year. It's just impossible.
On a brighter note, I read that you are you have the honour of being the only person to perform at every single Newbury Comedy Festival.
Hooray! I don't know if this is true or not.
It is now. It's on the internet.
Well, there you are then. Yes, objectively it's the case.
But there are no more Newbury Comedy Festivals.
So I will
that's
always
it.
have this.
You're like one of those Olympians who like did the Tiddlywinks in 1934. You can never ever have your medal
That's
taken
right.
away.
I'm going to get my laurel wreath right now, and I'm going to sport it at all times.
I'm torn because I've got some questions I'd like to ask you. I've just come back from holiday in Greece, and I visited, as I always try to do, some sites. So I have some questions.
Okay, I'm here for
some
you.
Scholarship.
I'm not an archaeologist, but I'll give it my best shot.
No, it wasn't even that. The bit you just said then, before we get stuck into your life, about the difference between the city and the rural community.
Yeah.
So I went to Messini, which is mad because it's like 5 or 6 sites in one, isn't it? So you can go to Epidavros or the Parthenon, or you can go to I went to Corinth on another occasion, or you can go to the Olympic Stadium. But when you go to Messini, you've got like a little mini version of all 5 or 6 of those things, the theatre, the forum. How did they decide to build a city there? Do we know? I mean,
specific location, I don't know exactly.
No, but any
but
location.
My guess is, sometimes it's always to do with water, at least in part. It's usually to do with high ground.
So they can see people coming.
So you can see people coming. I mean, at the point when Athens was being visited by Pausanias. So Pausanias is a geographer. He's writing a travel book, basically, the first travel book, pretty well, in the 2nd century, 1st century into the 2nd century, I think. And when he turns up in Athens, he can see not just the Parthenon that we can see now, which is kind of insane when you think about it. But also, isn't it?
Corinth, you're sitting there thinking, St. Paul stood here, or his letter got read out here.
It is nuts, isn't it?
Yes, it is nuts. I get that completely.
And so when Pausanias visits, there's not just the Parthenon, there's other temples to Athene. There's not just the statue of Athene who is inside the Parthenon, obviously long gone now, although you can see a replica in Nashville, of course. If not there, then where? But
Didn't know that.
Well, I'm here for these questions. But there's also an Athene promachos, so Athene in the front line of battle. So she's wearing the helmet, she's got her spear, and you could see, apparently, the tip of her spear and the top of the illustrated sort of, what's the word I want, like the feathers, the plume on her helmet. You can see them from Sunion. Sunion's more than 30 miles away. And it's like, if what you were hoping to do was convey to people that they would think twice before they attacked your city, that's not a bad way of doing it. And of course, when Athens is building these temples and these statues, they have been invaded by the Persians, a few decades earlier. So these things are being built in the second half of the 5th century BCE. So the Persians invade in 490 and then in 480. The city is torched. Athene's olive tree is burned. Although before the day is out, it's put up a whole new shoot that's like a cubit long or 2 cubits long or something. So you can never keep her down in her own city.
It's like the Sycamore Gap.
Right,
It's
exactly,
coming.
but slightly more, divine intervention,
Yes,
I think,
of
in
course.
terms of the replacement. But then you find other places in antiquity where, why does Rome become so powerful? I think the answer is roughly something like salt.
Yeah.
It has a tremendous supply of salt, and salt
Right.
is incredibly valuable. The word salary comes from salt.
It just grows up around it.
So, that's why Rome becomes Rome rather than Alba Longa becoming Alba Longa, I guess.
And if I didn't live in one of those cities, where would I have lived? Would I have just lived in a hut with my goats?
Yeah, I suppose so. You might have. I'm not going to rule out that you might have had the odd chicken.
Okay.
Why not?
No, of course.
You might have had a dog. You wouldn't have had a cat. There aren't cats in mainland Greece until relatively late. So there are mountain cats and things like that. But cats are in like Egypt. But you have to assume the odd one made it onto a boat or something. Cats being famously so fond of water and strangers. But yeah, so you might have had a dog, and you'd have lived in Attica, I guess. So the area around Athens. And that would have been a really good bet to avoid things like the plague that takes Athens in the end of the first year of the Peloponnesian War, 431 into 430. But the people who are in the area around Athens are drawn inside the city walls because of the attacks from Sparta from the south, where you were.
Yeah.
And so it's overcrowded, and then more people get plague, I'm afraid.
And I warned you that I could do this for the whole hour, so I'll try not to. But finally, how did they achieve renown? Because I like individuals. I was looking at some of the. You reminded how much has been lost, but how would you become a player in these cities, in these societies?
Well, Athens is a really interesting one because, of course, it has democracy, not representative democracy as we do, but direct democracy, with the caveat that you always have to remind yourself of when we talk about this, which is a limited franchise, which is citizen men. So not only no votes for women, not only no votes for, of course, slaves, but also people who come to Athens from other parts of Greece, metics, as they are called, who don't get a vote in Athens either. So this very limited adult male franchise of citizens nonetheless have a direct democracy. So if you wanted to be a local councillor by modern standards, you would never stand for that as a role to be elected.
Yeah.
You would simply be chosen by sortition, by lot. And you would serve for a day or a year, and then you'd be not booted out, but just moved on. Everyone's in constant rotation.
Okay.
And so you lose continuity, I suppose.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, corruption can't thrive for too long. And how do you, their juries were massive and they worked on the same system of people being chosen by lot. So how do you bribe a jury when there might be 500 of them and you don't know who it's going to be? So if you wanted to get ahead, what you needed to be good at was talking. So it would be great news for you.
Yeah. I was born in the wrong era.
Yeah,
I
feel the same
really.
thing.
I bet you do.
Yeah. Don't get me wrong. I really like having medicine and a vote.
Of course. No, these are positives. These are net positives.
Overall. But yeah, so you'd have gone and spoken at the agora, the marketplace.
Yeah.
You'd have had everybody hanging on your every word, just like Socrates does, until 399, when slightly less so. And
that's what they valued.
There is no education in antiquity without speech. If you want to be a politician, you're going to have to be an orator. If you want to be powerful as a kind of mover and shaker, you're still going to need political clout. You're still going to need that kind of, Cicero gets into politics in Rome because he's a brilliant lawyer and he's following a path that's been trodden by people like Demosthenes before him. Demosthenes gets into the law because he's been robbed of his patrimony by dubious relatives and he wants to go to the law courts to argue for it back. So,
literally argue for it back.
Yeah.
Literally do better with the words than the other lot
and
win.
Fully did. Yeah, absolutely.
It's incredible. That's a perfect answer. Because I kind of looked at it and thought, what do they actually do? How did you got 10 people here? How does that one end up top dog? And the answer is he was better at the chatter than the other 9.
He was probably better at talking, and some people, of course, are richer than others.
Sure.
So Nicias, who is the nephew, I think, of Pericles. Pericles is the great 5th century Athenian statesman who, amongst other things, pushes so hard for Athens to be beautified and made splendid, using money which they have looted from their colonies is slightly ungenerous, but not far off.
Yes.
And his nephew Nicias has, he partly owns or owns some of silver mines in Laurion, nearby Laurion. So that's a good way too, is to have family holdings.
It's always,
let's
yeah,
say.
plus ça change.
Yeah, yeah. Be born rich is one of my top tips for you. She said from Birmingham.
The last Duke of Westminster said, when someone asked him for advice on that, on precisely that, he said, it's a very good idea to have an ancestor who was best friends with William the Conqueror, which I think is a similar theme.
I think that's probably right, isn't it? I mean, if you want to, then that's a good way of doing it.
You've already provided an extraordinary insight into how deep and broad your knowledge is. So when do you know that you found the territory for your next book? Which of these myriad individuals and threads are the ones that do your antennae start twitching?
They do a bit. I mean, this one is unusual. No Friend to This House is an unusual one because I have been writing and thinking and talking about Medea and the Medea story, the story of the Argo, the quest for the Golden Fleece, since I was a teenager. So Euripides' Medea is my favourite Greek tragedy. It's the first or maybe second Greek play I read in Greek in the sixth form. My dad drove me down from Birmingham to London to see Diana Rigg play her at the Almeida.
Wow.
I know, because my dad had a crush on Diana Rigg because he's not a fool, obviously.
Win-win.
Exactly. And I had that thing. And, I don't think many people have this kind of experience, but I think the people who do, if you're going to have it, it might well be in the theatre, it might well be in the, unexpected. And I watched her as the Almeida's not a big theatre, and they had a huge metal kind of sheet at the back of the stage. And when Jason comes on, spoiler, when Jason comes on and demands the bodies of his children, she slammed her fist into the back wall and these two giant metal panels dropped. They were on wire. And the clanging noise, everyone jumped like a foot in their seats. And I remember thinking, even as it was happening, I will never be the same again. And I was never the same again. So, those times when you think, these kids at this, on this school trip at this theatre production are really annoying. Give them a minute.
Some of them will be having those
something
moments.
magical might be happening.
Yeah. Those are great. Could you put into words why you knew you would never be the same again?
It was just so intense. It's honestly, talking about it now is making the hairs on the back of my neck go up. Even after all this time, it's a play which has two quite extraordinary and devastating monologues, both delivered by her. So it gives a huge range to an actor who's playing that role. But what's properly, and I've been thinking about this for decades now.
Clearly.
I'm 16 when I first saw this, so I've had a lot of time. I wrote my dissertation on it as an undergraduate on the heroics of gendered infanticide. I don't have children before anyone writes in, nor did I used to have children before those people write in as well. The thing is, when you meet her, the chorus of this play have just said, Medea's in a terrible state. She's just lying on the ground. She's turned her face away from us. No matter what you say, she can't. She won't respond. She just groans. And then by the time she comes on stage, which is only a few moments later, she's completely composed, and you're like, oh, okay. And then she says to the chorus, my husband has behaved appallingly, and I'm going to find a way to make him pay. And if I can, you have to promise to keep the secret. And they go, yeah, all right. And then every single encounter because it's a play and not a novel, every time we see her, she's in dialogue with somebody else, apart from these two big monologues. And she's different every single time. And somehow, and I still don't really know how he does it, we, the audience, know who the real Medea is, and we know that she's putting on an act for each of these people that she's talking to. And sometimes it's really clear, after Creon leaves the stage, she says, I would never have fawned on him if it didn't help me out. And other times you're like, I know you're playing this person false, but I don't know why, I don't know how I know that. You've just made that happen. And I think it's the greatest play ever written in any language.
So quite bold then to think.
Do you think?
You might be able to...
I know. Someone was saying to me, I think when Stoneblind came out, because there are no literary sources really, almost none, Ovid, and a tiny, tiny scraps of like Hesiod about Medusa. And they said, the thing about kind of classical myth retelling is that you're kind of filling in the gaps, right? And you're like, yeah. And then I came to do this and I was like, oh, hang on. And then I realised that a play isn't a novel. And so before I started writing this novel, I sat down and I translated the play longhand, which I haven't done since I was a student. Translated bits and pieces for the radio or for the other books. But I sat down and that's where the title comes from. I made it to, I don't know, about line 76 or something. And the children's tutor says of Jason, that man is no friend to this house. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I'm having that. And I thought there were lots of ways I thought that the play would give me the form or the structure for the book, and it turned out not to be so. And the maddening thing, actually, from my perspective, is that I spent the entire book looking forward to 2 scenes, neither of which ended up being in it. I thought all the way through, I thought I'm going to have such a good time doing the scene with Talos, as he is beautifully named in the 1963 Ray Harryhausen version of Jason and the Argonauts. And, he's the big bronze giant. And I was
the
like...
The seminal version, I think.
Exactly, the canon text,
exactly
as we like to think of it.
Yes.
And I thought this is going to be so much fun, because in Apollonius of Rhodes's Argonautica, he is not met by the Argonauts on their way to the Golden Fleece, but on the way back. So it is Medea who takes him on. And it's so creepy. She basically puts the whammy on him and forces him to smash rocks into his own foot until he dies. And it's like, that is terrifying. And then when I got to that point in the book, I was like, oh, this scene doesn't fit. I don't get to write my big bronze giant. I can't believe it. And then the big monologue where Medea decides whether or not to kill her children in Euripides, I was so sure. I was like, I'm so ready to write this. And I got to that point in the book and I was like, God damn it.
It's not gonna fit.
It's the wrong, it belongs on a stage. It doesn't belong in the book. So at least I got to translate it before I started writing the novel.
What then, for the benefit of the tape, what is the conceit of the novel? What is the sort of...
Well, I wanted to show you the story of, as it were, more of the Argonautica, the whole quest of the Argo. So I wanted to start with the idea of the Golden Ram and who becomes, spoiler, the Golden Fleece, and where that creature comes from, and why it's obviously magical, it's obviously divine. In some versions it can fly. Occasionally there's a suggestion that it can swim. Occasionally it can talk, depending on the version of your myth. So it's like, okay, where does that ram come from? And that's the bit that I started, although it's not the beginning of the book. It's the interlude, which comes a bit later. But it was where I thought that the book started. And then I was like, oh, hang on, I've started in the wrong place. Hold on, everyone. Jeff that up there. And I wanted to take the story of the Argo, which has this hero in the most Greek sense of the word. A protagonist is a closer, because Jason isn't very heroic. He isn't very heroic in Euripides. He isn't very heroic in Apollonius of Rhodes. He's a very plausible, charming hero, but he's not particularly strong. He's not particularly tough. The Argonauts want Heracles, as the Greeks would have him, to lead them rather than Jason. And he sort of manages to persuade them. And so he is a fascinating figure because he is we're so used to liking him from the movie, I think. And, the bit where he fights the Earthborn warriors, who, of course, Harryhausen made them skeletons. Before that, they aren't.
Okay.
And now it's impossible to think of them any other way.
Yes.
And I don't know how I'm going to talk on the talk, because a lot of my readers are too young to have seen a film from 1963, because it wasn't on the only 3 or 4 channels there were.
And it was
every bank holiday forever.
Yes, exactly, wasn't it? It was like the Wizard of Oz for bank holidays.
It was a bylaw. Yeah, it was a bylaw. It was either Clash of the Titans, Sinbad, or...
All classics.
Yeah, exactly. That's all Jason and the Argonauts, and there we all were, watching them every single time. So, yeah, we basically knew them all by heart. And so the Jason that we get in that film is an interesting one, because I think it was quite a, shall we say, fraught film set, I believe, from interviews given later. But in Antiquity, he's a hero who receives a great deal of help from goddesses, but he never seems particularly confident. He never seems sort of particularly masculine in the terms of Greek myth, compared with, say, Achilles or Odysseus. And of course, his encounters with Medea, she is a super powerful witch and priestess, but only a teenage girl when they meet. So it's like you can be incredibly smart and yet emotionally very vulnerable, I imagine. But so she was always going to be in it. And of course their relationship is, I mean, toxic doesn't really come close, I think,
so there is,
describing it. So I really wanted to take on a story that I have loved so many times. And I was worried I'd broken it in my head, if you see what I mean, that once I'd written the book, I would have just thought about it enough for it not to kind of hit me again.
Well, yeah.
And then there was a kabuki production of it at the Coronet in Notting Hill earlier this year. And I got tickets to it, and I'd only just finished doing the audiobook for this, I think. And it was an incredibly hot day, and we went to see it, and it was just, by the end of it, we were like, oh my God. And they kind of added a sort of meta-narrative of the Lemnian women. I was like, you are kidding me. And, you know, got to the end and we were on our feet, and I was like, I think it still works. There's tears rolling down my face. I'm like, it's good, it still works for me.
That's lovely. Was that your first, mentioning those films, that sort of, to try, Harry Hamlin, there you go, there's a name that hasn't popped into my head for a very long time.
Who didn't have a crush on Harry Hamlin?
Was that your first nibble? Was that your first?
Yeah, I know what I'm supposed to say is that I had
I was reading your
high-minded book about Green Men. Absolutely not. I was sitting there with my brother going, Harry Hamlin's the best. We love Perseus. I wanted that Clockwork Owl more than other people wanted.
Archimedes,
little owl. I longed for him. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a huge gap between them. Jason and the Argonauts is 63.
Yeah, exactly.
Clash of
And you
Titans
can
is
feel
81.
it as well. That feels like a modern film, Clash of the
Yeah.
Titans. They did a remake recently, I think.
Yeah,
Did
they
another crack at it?
did. And I feel like it was Sam Worthington who
Maybe.
played the role.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things where, you know, I don't want to speak for absolutely every single person on earth, but I am going to say it nonetheless, that by modern beauty standards for men, Sam Worthington is clearly way more fit, way more muscular.
Objectively.
It is just simply the case that he is much more modernly handsome than Harry Hamlin, and yet it's Harry Hamlin all day long. Every single time. It's like, no, sorry, this is the rules. It doesn't matter that he's not as muscular. We'd absolutely go for Harry Hamlin.
So we can back up now almost to that sofa in Birmingham on which you'd have been sitting with your brother watching these films, because that is where you are from, raised in Bourneville.
That's right,
which is
the home of the chocolate.
Chocolate Central.
Yeah, I know. I thought everyone, when I read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, I didn't understand why it was special, because I thought everyone grew up with the smell of chocolate, you know, in their back garden.
I went out with a girl in Bourneville when I was a teenager, and no pubs.
No, only really recently. It was dry until just a few years ago. So if you want to go for a drink and you're in Bourneville, you've got to, I mean, I suppose you can drive, but you're going to have to walk home because that is just the right thing. But yeah, fittest alcoholics in the country.
How did the family end up there? Did you have grandparents that worked for Cadbury, or was it were they Quakers? Did you?
No, my mum and dad were both. My whole family is from Birmingham. And my mum and dad met because they taught in classrooms next door to one another.
That's nice.
Adorably.
Yeah.
My dad taught history, my mum taught English. And when they had my brother, they decided that they would like to live somewhere that was slightly, the thing about Bourneville is that it's a model village. It's great to have children. Still now, it's a great place to have children because you can walk everywhere. Because there is a village green with shops that are still shops.
You know, it's one of those 15-minute cities, isn't it? That the right wing gets so upset about.
Yeah, it turns out the Quakers were way ahead of them.
You can walk everywhere, and everything you need is within reach.
Yeah, exactly.
Including schools, doctors. The whole. So was it an idyllic childhood?
It was. It was, and I still go back as often as I can. It's one of the nice things about touring is that you can if you can't get back to London, and you often can't, you can often get back to Birmingham. So I can always go and stay with my mum, and she doesn't even mind. She likes it. The only downside is when I go running in Bourneville, because it is quite hilly, and I'd always felt like it was probably just me. Because it's not ever spoken of as a sort of objectively hilly place. And then when Birmingham had the Commonwealth Games a couple of years ago, the marathoners went out to Bourneville. So they were running round the bit that I run round. And there was just a moment where they came round a corner and this elite marathon runner just... So it turned out to be another freaking hill. And I was like, yes, madam, I know your pain, albeit that I would be doing it at approximately 1/2 of the speed.
That's brilliant. So it is vindicated. education.
I felt so good about it.
The hills, I've told you, it's hilly, it's very hilly.
I know,
It's
give
not
her a
Sheffield
medal.
or Rome. They're famous for their hills, but this is Bourneville.
Exactly.
I never clocked that. So unsurprising then to discover, and given that people who weren't already aware of your work will be now very aware of your intellectual clout and the ease with which you talk about these subjects, it was a house full of books.
It was a house full of books because my grandmother worked for a bookshop in the centre of Birmingham. So she worked for Hudson's.
Hudson's, wouldn't it?
It was Hudson's. And then she worked with a lovely man named Bill Hornby. And he had a little bookshop called Hornby's, which was my first Saturday job. I started working there the week I turned 16 because he'd worked with my nan. It's all about who you know, you see.
Nice. Where was Hornby's? Was that in Bournemouth?
It was just
that
at the top of the ramp. So you'd go up the ramp into the Palisades, as it was then.
Yeah.
I can hear my Birmingham accents coming back.
Mine will as well.
We're
if we're not
talking about
careful.
it. Yeah, so you'd go up the ramp, and
Yeah.
then it was on the left, next to what was Austin Reed.
Yeah, that's right. The Taylor's. There's a sandwich shop or a baked potato shop there.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And so I worked there for several years. And so when my grandmother worked at Hudson's, she had all the book reps who would bring round the proof copies of children's books that were coming up, knew she had 2 grandchildren. And so they would always bring them for her. And she would just, bring them back. And so we had a constant supply. And they never had the covers on, of course. And also the remaindered ones where they've torn the cover off. And we would have, I didn't read a book with an actual cover on for years, I don't think. But it's happened to me 2 times, I think now, once in Birmingham and once gloriously, unexpectedly in Amsterdam. I have met somebody who worked with my grandmother who is still a bookseller. And both times it's been everything I could do not to just burst into tears because it was so beautiful.
Cool.
My grandmother died more than 20 years ago. But I was in Amsterdam doing a book event a year or 2 ago, and I walked into the Waterstones, for of course there is one in Amsterdam, and asked them if they wanted me to sign books, and they did. And the guy, I said, "You're a long way from home," because I could hear his accent, and it turned out that he had worked and he was like, "Oh, I used to work at Waterstones in Birmingham, but before it was Waterstones." And I said, "When it was Dillon's?" He said, "Oh, before that." And I'm like, "When it was Hudson's." It was so great.
That's lovely.
So yeah, it's always just I'm always really conscious of the fact that my first job was selling books, and I was following in the family tradition selling books, and now I get to do a whole different thing of writing them.
Was that? I mean, did you form that ambition early?
No,
you didn't.
No, I had no idea you could write books. Really, I remember interviewing Fran Lebowitz about 150 years ago for Radio 4, and I asked her when she knew she wanted to write books, and she said as soon as she realised that books weren't like trees and that people made them. And I was like, what a great answer. I wish it was mine. But no, absolutely not. I went into stand-up because I thought I could be a stand-up. And then I started writing op-ed for newspapers because, I kind of wanted to spend time in my flat with my then partner. And then I started writing books kind of thinking, well, it's like a
long op-ed.
Yeah, it's like a newspaper column, but it's just a bit bigger, isn't it? What's the worst that can happen? And so, yeah, I still find it strange. I think that might be my 9th book, and I still don't really accept it.
So where did it first emerge then? I mean, to knit all these strands together. You've got an enthusiasm for the classical world based largely on Harry Hamlin.
Correct.
And the passion
the owl.
And the owl, of course,
Yep.
and the passion for books, which you've inherited from your grandmother, and also it's been facilitated by the extraordinary number of books that you have access to. Did you shine at school? Were you a very clever little girl at school?
I was, yeah, and I must have been super annoying.
Why?
I think just generally smart kids can be quite annoying. And I don't think I was always generous I was clever without always being kind, okay. I think probably. Which is something I've tried to temper over time by becoming stupider.
Being impatient with people who aren't as clever as you?
I am impatient still, and I just try harder now not to be.
So how would that emerge at school?
I think I was probably I was always quite quick-witted, I suppose, which turned into being a comedian. And I just think I wasn't necessarily I was definitely a person that you could cram homework off. I'm quite I will have always done it. I say this blithely as though I'm not going to walk on stage in a couple of days having written it on the bus.
Yeah.
But details. So I was, I think I was always that thing where you're supposed to be funny because, otherwise the other kids will bully you. I'm
Yeah.
5'9". Nobody was going to bully me. I've been tall for ages. So I think probably I wasn't kind as I could have been to teachers rather than students.
okay.
I think I definitely, for sure, corrected spelling mistakes and things. And that's just not a very kind thing to do. Stop laughing, you're making it worse.
But there must have been teachers who, well, no, maybe not, but were very special.
I was incredibly lucky because, classics isn't a particularly popular subject.
So when did that kick? Because there's a difference between liking the films and wanting to study it.
Yeah,
so I started 12-year-old girl
doing
in Birmingham doing Latin,
I had compulsory Latin at my school.
Everyone did.
Everyone did.
This is at King Edward VI.
That's right.
High school for girls in Edgbaston.
Big old nerd school.
So I have another girlfriend from my days in the Midlands who was head girl at Edgbaston High, which was the big rival of King Edward
although
VI.
I opened the tour for my last book at Edge High and I didn't think it would be a thing.
It still was.
Because, we're in our 40s
Yes.
and yet I had a whole bunch of people I was at school going, cannot believe you're opening your show there with the enemy. I'm like, is it possible? It's all fine now.
Let it go. Although it's kind of apt given the territory that you explore. These grudges are not easily surrendered.
Exactly.
Are they?
Yeah, no, I should have remembered the lifelong honour of the House of Haynes
There
is
you
at
are.
stake.
Yes, exactly. Exactly that, traitor. And as soon as you started studying it, you loved it?
I loved it.
Right.
Yeah, I loved
Which
it
is
straight
weird,
away.
right?
Is it though? I think Latin is a really great language for little kids to learn because, brutally, it's relatively easy and you never have to say it. So the thing that I think kind of makes us come unstuck as a nation with learning other languages, which we are notoriously bad at, is of course that English is a world language, so we often don't need another language. But it's also, I think, a very British sense of embarrassment that you might get it wrong.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I still have it too. And I can follow reasonable quantities of modern Greek, but I absolutely wouldn't say it. I'll definitely get the emphasis on the monosyllable. I'm feeling slightly embarrassed thinking about it. And the joy of Latin is you don't have to say it. You can read it, And so I always try and remind people when they ask me how you pronounce a name, and it's like, I can tell you how I pronounce it, but it's not right. It's just how I pronounce it. And I use Anglicized. I would say Ovid instead of Ovidius. And, that would be fine. So there isn't really a right answer.
So
It's all
what's the
right.
appeal? It's a combination of puzzle and poetry.
Exactly. And when you start learning Latin, it's basically maths, which I loved. It's equations. You're having to substitute things for things. And the word sentence is so predictable. The word shape, the sentence shape is so predictable, the word order. And so you find, you very quickly work out what agrees with what, that the endings on words are the same if they agree with one another. So you can identify which noun and adjective belongs to because they've got the same endings. And if it's like cracking a code. That's why so many of the code breakers at Bletchley had been classicists. And so that bit is great. And then suddenly you get your GCSE, which you can do perfectly successfully, essentially treating it like maths. And then you start having to learn to write about poetry. And, you suddenly, it becomes an art rather than just a science. And you realise that, I'm obviously profoundly biased, that classics, therefore, is kind of the best of both worlds. It means that you can respond at an artistic level, but also that your basic, need to solve a puzzle element is being fed at the same time. And so I was incredibly lucky because my school taught Greek, which almost nowhere did then, let alone
But which
now.
wasn't compulsory.
It wasn't. I had to choose between Greek and German. And I once had the great delight of standing on stage as a comedian in Berlin and explaining to an audience of German people that I would be doing my set in English because I'd had the chance at school to choose between German and Greek, ancient Greek, and I'd chosen Greek because I thought it would be more useful. Thank you. That's the laugh I was waiting for. And it's only 25 years too late because I swear to God, 400 German people as one went, that's a difficult choice. Your parents must be very proud of you. I was like, oh, okay. And then for the whole of the rest of the night, I was like their wayward niece at a family wedding who's doing better than they thought she would. So well done her.
It's a bit of ownership. I love that.
So yeah, I chose Greek because I liked the alphabet.
How many people were in that class?
There were 13 of us.
Oh, that
12
many?
or 13.
Gosh.
Oh yeah, we were, and there were 7 of us doing A-level Greek 2 years
Right.
later. So we were, a game-changing year.
You went all in for A-levels, presumably, Latin, Greek and ancient history.
I literally did, and general studies to, prove that I wasn't a one-trick pony.
Just to mix it up. And were you already earmarked for, I mean, there's not actually that many places where you can do classics, but were you earmarked for Oxbridge already?
Yes, I suppose so. I certainly wanted to go there. My parents were really hopeful, I think, that I would go there. And my grandparents, I think the whole idea seemed slightly insane to them that I was doing, Latin and Greek. And because it's so abstruse, I don't think it ever occurred to anyone that I would do it. I remember somebody saying to my mom when I'd chosen you can hear with Birmingham talking, because I'm going back to mom as opposed to mum, like I would say now, because I'm fancy and southern these days. So, I remember someone saying to my mom that they were like, well, what's she going to do with triple classics? And my mum said, whatever she wants. She'll do whatever she wants. And she was right, of course.
Well, if I'd met you then, in the upper six, and said, what do you want to do when you grow up, what would you have said?
I don't think I had any idea, really. I started doing stand-up when I was in my first or second term in Cambridge, I think.
Did that come out of nowhere?
No, I
mean, were you in plays at school and stuff like that?
I'm incredibly shy.
So no performing, no show off, no look at me, Gene. That's weird.
And
then.
right? And then I met this incredibly handsome man at a party.
Did he look like Harry Hamlin?
He looked like Adonis. He was so beautiful. And he said, "You're the funniest girl I've ever met." And I was like, that's almost the adjective we were looking for. But at least that's a superlative. I'll work with what I've got. Yeah. And so I said, we should write something for Footlights. And then obviously it was the 90s, so I took him home that night. And we dated for like 3 weeks or something, and then he broke my heart into 1,000 shards. But then a couple of days later, he turned up with a sketch that he'd written, which was awful, but I couldn't tell him because he was so handsome. And so I was like, well, I can't appear in that, so I'll just write. And I was like, I'm working on something too. And he walked me to the audition, and I was auditioned by James Barkman and Robert Webb. And they, because it's the day pre-phones, because I'm 900 years old, they used to put up a list of who'd been accepted into the cabaret night the next day, and I remember going in my name, I was like,
going on the notice board with you, looking for your name.
Yeah, and there it was. And so my first ever stand-up performance, I guess technically, was to James and Robert, and then the second was to a full house at the ADC Theatre in Cambridge, to 225 people, I think it used to hold. It was, I can remember there being a line about Nina Simone. I remember there being, I can't remember anything about it. I think probably a lot of stand-ups, actually that's maybe not true, it maybe divides into two. There are the people who can fanatically remember every single moment of every single gig. And then there are the people like me who forget so that they don't have to drink to forget. And so I will routinely find myself in a small town somewhere, anywhere in the country, and I will know from some kind of mysterious muscle memory that I've been there before. And sometimes I can even get, I find myself walking past the venue and I know I've performed in it and I have a strong emotional hit, but I cannot tell you whether it was a good or a bad gig. It's like my brain has fully wiped the details to protect the guilty. So I think that's a good system.
But you remember the feeling you had that night, I think. It was
incredible. Yeah, it was absolutely incredible.
Clanging metal sheet type moment.
Yeah, exactly. And that thing where you think, I think this must be what drugs are like. This must be what it's like, because I would... the sense of being on stage and having that, it's illusory at the start of your career almost, and sometimes it's still illusory. But the sense that you have this audience and you have total emotional kind of connection with them, that you will decide when they next laugh, it is an incredible moment and you're like, I can make this laugh come here, or I can cruise it and bring it out here, or I can do this with it. And it is just an astonishing, it's so heady. And you spend a long time trying to get that back. You generally, the first time I used to find that you do material, it absolutely works, and then like times 2 to 10.
Yeah.
And then after that you work out how to make it sound like you did it the first time, and usually it works. So I'm really glad that the new tour is like 11 shows long, because otherwise I'd be feeling sad.
So and I mean, you're obviously good at it and addicted to it. You'd say it was like drugs. How quickly did you allow yourself to think it could be a career?
Immediately.
Straight
I wanted
away.
it immediately.
Because that's quite, again, that's, presumably mum and dad weren't over the moon about that.
I think they were expecting me to do something slightly more predictable.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. I don't know what they thought. I mean, I'm literally qualified to be a classicist and by experience to be a stand-up comic. I have exactly the job I trained for.
Yes.
But it is a job I had to invent.
Yes, it's no one else. No track record, no guides, no.
And yet.
Here we are.
It was all fine.
But you did teach for a bit, I think, straight after
20
university.
minutes, yeah. I taught
at Harrow.
Yeah.
Right.
And
I did a double take on it because you know what it's like these
know.
days with the internet. You sort of that can't quite.
Yeah, no, I taught a term at Winchester College and a term at Harrow School, and then I retired from teaching at the age of 23. And now people say, "Oh, wouldn't you like to teach, or wouldn't you like an academic post?" And it's like, I just couldn't do the paperwork. I couldn't do it then.
Well, you do the nice bits of teaching.
That's
don't you?
exactly it. I get to teach hundreds of people at a time, and I never have to write a report. It's like, this is the holy grail version of teaching, because you just get to do the bit where you impart information to people who are happy to hear it.
Interesting, you went. Well, I suppose it's because it's classics and they wouldn't be taught at many schools. You'd have to go to public schools. But I read that
you kind of do.
You were quite chippy when you got to Cambridge, though.
I think I was really chippy. Yeah, I felt really strongly that nobody I knew really at my college had a job, and I was like,
even a holiday job, weekend jobs, nothing. Was it all public school?
Not all, but it was
Almost
still
all.
A very male-dominated college. They'd only let women in the previous decade, I think, and it was like. And I'd come from a girls' school, and I had, I had a brother. I've got one. I don't not like boys. Sometimes some people might have said as an undergraduate, I like boys too much.
Yes.
But I didn't necessarily want to be surrounded by quite as many braying ones as I was, I would say. And so I have still got one really close friend who has been my close friend since that first term at college. And I don't keep in touch with a single other person.
Even the fellow footlighters, the footlights
I keep,
people.
we were at different colleges, but the same university. So, a few of them, and I see them around the place, obviously, because we overlap a bit at Radio 4. So, I do, I keep in touch with some of the footlights people, but I don't keep in touch with anyone from my actual college.
Okay.
Except one.
And did you love the work, or did the...
I did.
Did the new love eclipse the old love
a bit.
Yes.
A bit it probably did.
It was bound to, wasn't it?
It had to a bit.
Yeah.
Stand-up is a heady drug for sure. But I did still love... I mean, I specialised in ancient philosophy when I was an undergraduate because my director of studies, the person who was in charge of my day-to-day study of classics at my college, was and is a world authority on Hellenistic philosophy. He literally co-wrote the book on Hellenistic philosophy. It's called The Hellenistic Philosophers. So not even a joke. And so I did papers on Aristotle and Plato because he was such a brilliant teacher. And he was one of those teachers who makes other people cleverer.
Ah, yes.
Because otherwise he would have no one to talk to.
Gosh.
If you see what I mean.
Like a chess player.
Yeah. So you would be discussing Zeno's paradoxes or something, and he would say, I think the argument that you've just advanced is the one made by Aristotle. And you'd be sitting there going, yeah, all right, yeah. Let's say I have. Yeah. Let's say that's the case and continue. And then he would refute Aristotle's argument. You'd be like, that idiot.
So I mean, fully engaged with this. And for a long time, and the allure of footlights, literally and metaphorically notwithstanding, never tempted by academia, right? Because not wanting to be a teacher. So you might have done
so,
if you...
Yeah, I stayed an extra year in Cambridge when I was starting out as a stand-up. So when you're doing open spots, you're doing unpaid shows, 5 minutes at a time, learning your trade. And I would have happily stayed and done a master's degree then had I been able to afford to do it, but I couldn't then. And of course, it's way more difficult for students now. So I try not to be that, hopelessly unaware person of a certain age telling young people to follow their dreams, because it's just so much more expensive to do that. And now I think if I'd had to pay £9,000 a year in fees, would I have been so cavalier about the sort of job prospects? I don't know. I mean, the year after I graduated, I signed on and just did open spots for about 8 months, I guess. And every 2 weeks I would have to turn up at the job centre.
Yeah.
And they were so kind. And, you know, I would explain to them that I was going to do an open spot, and they would explain to me that that was the same as a job interview, so I didn't need to declare that. I mean, it's going to make me cry thinking about it, you know, the £10 that I would get for having turned out to do it. And I guess in total, probably the money that I received from the state that year would have been something like about, I don't know, with housing benefit, £2,000, maybe £3,000. I'm not sure how long it takes me to pay that back in tax now, but it's not very long. It was a really good investment.
And that was the difference,
what I would say,
between being able to do it and not being able to do it.
Yeah. If I had wanted to stay on and do a master's, then I would have had to find the money for the rent, and I couldn't have done it.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because journalism's not entirely different in the sense that if you couldn't live in London and be available for shifts, you would never get a foot in the door.
Absolutely.
It's probably harder now than it was then for all the new Labour social mobility, as you say.
I think that's exactly right. And the thing is, you felt it so strongly if you weren't from London.
Yes.
And it's like, I felt the unfairness of it so strongly, seeing friends whose parents lived within Zone 3 who were able to just give them somewhere free to stay while they interned at a newspaper.
Never mind the ones with trust funds and flats in Pimlico.
Exactly. I mean,
level.
just having that. You know, there's that great line that Jess Phillips said about the House of Commons, that she thought she'd known posh people in Birmingham, but it turned out they just liked olives. And it's like, oh my God, I have rarely felt so seen as that. It's like, yeah.
I hadn't heard that. I love that. How quickly did it happen for you then with
really
the stand-up?
Slowly.
Yeah. But you knew it was worth persevering.
No, I didn't.
No.
Now I do.
You've just thrown
But
all your
then
eggs
I
into
didn't.
that basket.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
couldn't turn back.
I was such a brave little kid. And now I look back on it and I think I was driving the length of the country. I might do 1,000 miles in a weekend. In a knackered old car. I was staying I would be staying somewhere, and you know, you would have no GPS. So I'd got a road atlas, and my dad would write the directions on a post-it note and stick it to the road atlas and then you would get to Manchester or Sheffield, for which of course you didn't have an A to Z because you didn't live there. An A to Z, people who are younger than me, is like Google Maps but older. And then maybe the promoter might have photocopied a page out of the A to Z, and then they might have taken a highlighter pen and put an X near the venue, and that would be it. That'd be all you had. And I just used to turn up and then hunt around for like somewhere to park the car, and then try and be good at reverse parking, and then try and find the gig, and then, you know, it would be a disaster, and then you'd have to drive all the way home again, and it'd be like 2:00 in the morning. And now I don't know what. I think if I'd been the parent of me, age 23, I would have locked me up in a tower rather than let that happen. And yet I am afraid of no audience now, you know, because when people say,
you've done it.
Oh,
how bad could it be?
Exactly. Someone says, oh, when I introduce you on stage, it's like, it doesn't matter. You can do whatever you like. And what's the worst?
It's a superpower in a way.
In a way it is, because once you've been on stage and it has literally caught fire, you're like, we'll be fine. We'll be fine.
When then would you have allowed yourself to relax and think, okay, I've cracked it now?
I'll sleep when Latin's dead. All right,
not relax, but this is no longer a purgatory, or this is no longer a hiding.
Like the first 5 years were really grim.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting, that impression.
No, the first 5 years were really hard. And the whole time that I was doing it, I kept thinking, you know, you'd put dates in your diary knowing they were going to be really hard, and I would dread them from the minute they were in my diary till they happened. And sometimes that might be 4 months. And every time you flip the pages, you'd be like, I'm going to have to go and die on my arse that night. And then the whole time I was like, if I can just get to the point where if I can just get through the nerves, it'll be. And although I did learn through that, you know, sometimes you're nervous and it looks diffident. Sometimes you're nervous and they like you. Sometimes you're confident and you look arrogant. Sometimes you're confident and they like you. There's not necessarily...
It's alchemy, isn't it?
Same with writing. You can have a good day of writing and it reads bad. You can have a bad day of writing and it reads bad. You can have a good day and it reads great. You know, bad day, it reads perfect. So you'd never believe that it went down one syllable at a time, but it did. And I thought, if I can just get through the fear, I'll be all right. And then after about 5 years, I stopped being so worried by it all. And you know what? I didn't love it as much.
Okay.
And I was like, oh God, It was the fear I was addicted to, I think.
Adrenaline.
I think so. I thought it was the hit of the live show, but I think it was overcoming the fear that I wanted. And yet I haven't replaced it by, doing parachute jumps or something. I don't crave damage at all costs. No. So at least there's that.
So in fact, it's less of a mystery then about knocking it on the head when the other parallel enthusiasm began to overtake the comedy, when the classics started to move. So in fact, it wasn't like a very difficult decision.
It really wasn't. When I go and speak to kids, which I don't get to do as often as I used to these days, I always tell them that I ran away and joined the circus, and then I ran away from the circus and joined the library. And that's pretty well true. I didn't ever stop being interested in classics while I was doing stand-up, but it was a sort of interest or a hobby at that point. And then gradually, as I was writing op-ed, classic stuff.
How did you get into that? How did that present itself?
I was booked on a TV show because the booker had heard me on Radio 4, and I was on Radio 4 because I'd been Perrier Newcomer nominated. And the booker on the TV show got in touch and said, would you come on our TV show? And I wrote back and said, no, I don't really like TV and I don't think I'd enjoy it. And she said, please. And she was an extremely persuasive woman. And so I said yes. And it was like a topical sort of newsy discussion-y show. The first or second or third time I was on, I sat next to Daniel Finkelstein, now Lord Finkelstein. And he was running op-ed at the Times at that point. And Alan Corrin was unwell. And he said, do you think you could write me, I can't remember what it was, like 900 words for Saturday? And like all people who are freelance, I said, yes.
Yes, of course.
Of course I could. And then I got out and, delivered. And I wrote for them for about 5 years. And then I made a sideways move to The Independent because I thought, what if I could do this but for much less money? Yeah. That would be great. And then I was there for about 5 years too. And
so there's 3 dogs running now. There's the classics, there's the comedy, there's the
I'm
writing.
a big fan of plate spinning as a freelancer.
Well, I think you have to be.
You have to because you don't know which one's going to crash.
No,
I
spent
a decade reviewing arts for mainly the BBC, doing review show and then review, and then doing Saturday Review for Radio 4 when telly reviewing had dried up. And I wrote film reviews and so I arts reviewed for about a decade. But of course, there's just the BBC does very little of it now.
It's extraordinary. And they've just finished Sarah Cox's show as well, haven't they? They've just announced the end of that.
So,
did you have ambition during this period? Did you think that's something I'd like?
Yeah, I would have absolutely loved it if the market for reviewing had stayed intact. I used to have an absolute ball doing it. And I used to review things that I knew nothing about on a regular basis. So everything you think about reviewers is true. They really don't know anything and they are idiots. But I had an absolute ball. And sometimes, I did things that you would not normally do. Getting up at 4 a.m. to fly to, Amsterdam, I think, in order to review a Dutch Masters exhibition and then being flown back, all Ryanair before anyone writes in. Yes. The BBC confidently paying approximately 15 pence to keep its reviewers in the air. And so it was just a fantastic time.
I think we've almost come full circle because I was about to ask about, because you talk about spinning plates, and I was going to ask a very clever question about when you managed to get 2 plates onto the same stick and started spinning 2 plates of this. But that's where we began, isn't it? It's when you realised that in order to promote
Ancient Guide,
the book, you would do a version of...
I would do something that was a bit like stand-up, or at least owed its form to stand-up, although it wouldn't be as funny. Although there were plenty of people who saw me when I was technically funny who would be like, I wouldn't put on the Haynes. And that's fair enough.
And when did you realise that was working? Was it on that first tour with the first book?
I mean, my philosophy generally, when you're trying to persuade people that they want a thing that you can do, but that there isn't a space for it yet, is that you basically just have to smash your head into a brick wall over and over again until the wall breaks, and the whole time you have to do it, you have to pretend it doesn't hurt. And so it was quite a trying time in lots of ways, saying to people, but in a minute this is going to be amazing, but in a minute this is going to be amazing. And mostly the thing which is one of the nicest things about my life now is that I have to spend so much less time persuading people that it will actually be good and they should let me do it. And, sometimes they're they're noble reasons
Yes.
that they have for suggesting that you don't do that. You know, when way back in series 5 of Stand Up for the Classics, I told them that what I wanted to do was do a solo episode, which we'd never done. And so it would be one voice for 28 minutes on Radio 4, which is incredibly unusual. The grammar of radio is that you don't do that. And I said, I'm on tour at the moment, hardly ever get to do it that way around where I've practiced it before I do it for the radio. It's always the other way around. But on this one occasion, because I was promoting 1,000 Ships at the time, I was doing an Iliad, a version of the Iliad in about 35, 40 minutes. And I said, I can get it down to 28. And they said, okay. And I was like, no, honestly, it's amazing. It'll be great. And they were like, mm-hmm. And then people kept, they kept trying to sort of stage an intervention, going, you know, you don't have to, you know, it would. And I was like, it'll be great. It'll be great. It'll be great. It'll be great. And everybody was I was worried about it, and trying to get it down to, because you've got so little to play with, you know, because the running time has to be, I don't think this is wrong, it had to be not less than 27:45.
Yeah.
And not more than 28:15. And that is not a lot to play with when you're trying to decant 24 books of Greek poetry into that many minutes. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And we recorded it at the Radio Theatre just across town for the BBC. And it was so stressful. The tension of doing it, trying to hold my whole body tight, trying to do it. So it's like, and with everybody basically going, she doesn't have to do this, you know. We did tell her she didn't have to do it. And I was counting it on
This is recreating the adrenaline.
I know. Yeah. I was just like, this is the fear I can't now find elsewhere. And so I'd got my iPad with everything turned off so no one could text me, just to act as a timer.
Yeah.
And I told the audience, I was like, we're going to try this thing, and I don't know how it's going to go. And if I start to do this at you, to make tiny signs, it means laugh less, because we're running out of time. But I've got to bring it in no shorter than this, no longer than that. Got it? And they all went, And 28 minutes and 14 seconds later, as I brought it in with 1 second to spare, and it felt like I had just parked like a spaceship on something, and it was just the room went wild. I collapsed to my knees. You know, I've run I don't know how many half marathons now. Nothing was as arduous as doing that was. And I got home and I was like, that was amazing. And then I had to go back out on tour the next day, and then I had to go back on tour the day after that. And I got home, I think 3 days later, and threw up every 20 minutes for 2 days. So I was like, okay, let's not do that again. That's too much tension.
Good Lord.
Yeah.
The book is out now.
The book is out.
No Friend to This House.
Whoop.
And you're touring it.
Yes,
People
of
can
course.
find out at your website, is it? NatalieHaynes.com.
It absolutely is. Yeah. So the launch show is Bloomsbury on Tuesday the 9th. And then I will also be in Warwick and Edinburgh and Hexham and Chester and Monmouth and Oxford and Cambridge, going back just to check they haven't made the place nice while I was away. And so, I'll be around the country talking about it and talking about the Argonaut myth, basically.
Argonaut myth. And is there anything that you really want to do that you haven't done yet?
I mean, there are more books to write.
You're just quite happy with this?
There's more radio to make.
Please may I carry on?
Yeah, basically. I'd like to see...
That doesn't count as a major ambition.
No, well, I mean, it does a bit, doesn't it?
No,
There's
it
always
does,
the option
but it
of
doesn't.
not carrying
It's not
on.
headline, is it?
Yeah, no, I suppose not. But
I want to make a film, or I want to set it to music, or I want to...
I mean, those things are definitely outside my skills, I think. So when somebody else does, it's always really lovely when other people make work off your work.
Yes.
You know, when people have produced artwork or stage work, but it is so thrilling. And a few years ago, when we were in lockdown, I translated Ovid poems every week on video, having spent my entire stand-up classics career mocking Pliny the Younger, because when Vesuvius erupted, he stayed at home reading Livy. I then became him. And when the world ended, I stayed at home reading Ovid. I was like, oh my God, no wonder I mock him. I am him. And I'm just going to write some letters about drains, and that'll be it. And so I would still love to do more with those, I think. I wrote one, adapted one, I suppose, that Olivia Williams performed for Jermyn Street Theatre in 2020, not with a live audience, but on camera. That was amazing. So it would be lovely to do that again. The stage is where a lot of my heart belongs, I think. So, yeah, maybe that. We'll see.
Natalie Haynes, thank you.
Thanks for having me.